Could you even imagine trying to save someone's life or to help them? And at the same time that you were trying to save their life, they were trying to hurt you or destroy you or even further, take your life from you? We couldn't even possibly imagine that. But let's get this story from Mark's Gospel, chapter 3, beginning in verse 1. It says, "Again, he entered the synagogue, he being Jesus, and a man was there with a withered hand. And they watched to see whether he would heal him on the Sabbath, so that they might accuse him. And he said to the man with the withered hand, 'Come here.' And he said to them, 'Is it lawful on the Sabbath to do good or to do harm, to save a life or to kill?' But they were silent. And he looked around at them with anger and grieved at the hardness of the heart, and said to the man, 'Stretch out your hand.' And he stretched it out, and his hand was restored. And the Pharisees went out and immediately held counsel with the Herodians against him, how to destroy him." It's an interesting story. Jesus, of course, going into the synagogue to worship, to possibly teach, and the Pharisees there, the religious rulers of the day, they were there and they were keeping an eye on him to see if he would do something unlawful on the Sabbath. They wanted to accuse him of breaking the Old Testament law. And when he was there, he saw this man who was obviously in need, a man who had a withered hand. I mean, in those days, most people worked with their hands, or at least certainly a lot of them did. And he didn't have the ability to provide for himself. So Jesus, being God, being compassionate, being normal, wanting to do something nice for someone, had it in mind to go ahead and heal the man with the withered hand. And the scribes and the Pharisees were watching to see if he would actually do that. So Jesus asked the man to come on over to him. And he said to the Pharisees, after the man came forward, he says, "Is it lawful on the Sabbath to do harm or to do good, to save a life or to destroy a life?" But they didn't have anything to say about that. They knew that doing something beneficial for someone any day of the week couldn't be argued with. So they just waited to see what he would do. And then it says that Jesus had two emotions going for him. He was angered and he was grieved. He was angry because they were looking to judge him, but he was grieved at how hard their hearts had become. So he went ahead and he told the man, "Stretch out your hand." And when he did, it was healed, restored. And of course, the scribes and the Pharisees were angry, and they went out to seek counsel as to how they might destroy him. And what's interesting is that they went out and they met with their own mortal enemies, the Herodians. The Herodians and the Pharisees certainly weren't on the same page about life. So what do we see here? What do we see here that's so interesting? Well, we see that Jesus wants to be God in this situation, and people who are supposed to be spiritual and knowledgeable, educated, because the scribes and the Pharisees were very educated. They were trying to do everything they could to prevent him from revealing the purposes and plans of God, because they wanted to keep everything just as it was, because that's where their power lied. They didn't want the Messiah to be there, even though they said they did. They didn't, because the coming of the Messiah would have lowered them greatly in stature and status. So they didn't want that. And so they did everything they could to destroy Jesus, even going to the point of planning with their own enemies to do it. And when we look at the world today and the world that we live in, we're trying to do many of the things that Jesus was trying to do. We're literally trying to save people's souls. We're trying to save their lives. But so many of this world are standing firm against us, watching our every move. With the media being the way it is, and access to information literally everywhere, people are reading about what Christians are doing, and Christians are under assault literally all over the world, even here in America. People are being persecuted and reviled and hated and spit upon. People who are trying to share the good news of the gospel are being ridiculed and hated. And in some cases, their lives are being threatened. They're being imprisoned. This is what we face today. But we should be like Jesus. Jesus was determined to carry out the plan of God, regardless of what others thought, what others might do to try to prevent him from doing so. And he went ahead and he healed the man. He did what he felt would be pleasing in the sight of his Father. And you and I may be ridiculed or see other Christians being ridiculed and imprisoned and treated in unethical, immoral, impractical ways, and we might be angry. But the other side of that, we should also be grieved at heart, grieved at their hardness, grieved at their unwillingness to see the love and the grace and the mercy of God. We should be brokenhearted that they are literally joining forces with people that they ordinarily wouldn't join forces with just to destroy the message of the gospel of Christ. But the good news for you and me is that all of this is biblical. The Bible clearly teaches that in the last days, Christians are going to be persecuted. We're going to be ridiculed, laughed at, spit upon, arrested, imprisoned. In many cases, our lives are going to be required of us. Not necessarily here in the United States yet, but certainly in other parts of the world. You and I should just follow the example of Jesus. Jesus said, "Let your light shine in such a way that men may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven." So be a light in an increasingly darkening world. God bless.